In the shadowy corners of 1970s London's East End, legends aren't born in shootouts or barroom brawls. They're forged in whispered conversations and midnight rendezvous. But some legends prefer to stay hidden, drowning their memories in cheap whiskey until the past comes calling. This is the story of James "Ghost" Morrison, a man whose weathered exterior masks one of MI6's most lethal former operatives. When a group of local thugs mistake his apparent alcoholic stupor for weakness, they're about to learn that the most dangerous predator is the one that lets you think it's harmless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Blind Raven pub stands like a grimy sentinel in London's roughest district, its windows clouded with decades of cigarette, smoke and broken dreams. Inside, James Morrison nurses his fourth glass of scotch, his once sharp eyes now deliberately unfocused, his formerly athletic frame hidden beneath a shabby overcoat. 3 months he's been here, becoming just another fixture in this dingy establishment. Another lost soul seeking oblivion in the bottom of a glass. The regulars know him as Jimmy the Drunk, a quiet man who keeps to himself, paying his tab with crumpled notes that smell of mothballs and regret. They don't know that beneath his fraying cuffs, his wrists bear scars from Soviet interrogators in Prague. They don't see how his seemingly random seat choice gives him clear sightlines to all entrances and exits. Morrison's carefully cultivated image of harmlessness shatters when Marcus Kane and his crew swagger through the door. These aren't ordinary thugs. Their clothes are too expensive, their watches too genuine. Kane, a rising star in London's criminal underground, has been buying up properties across the East End, using methods that would make even the most hardened gangster uncomfortable. "Well, well," Kane's voice carries across the pub as he spots Morrison. "If it isn't our resident philosopher." His men spread out, unconsciously adopting tactical positions that make Morrison's left eyebrow twitch slightly. These aren't common criminals. They're trained, probably ex-military. Old Tom, the bartender who's shown Morrison small kindnesses since his arrival, tenses visibly. "Mr. Kane, he's harmless. Just a broken man who needs his peace." Kane approaches Morrison's table, trailing expensive cologne and menace. "Broken is right. Tell me, old man, have you figured out the meaning of life at the bottom of that glass yet?" Morrison's hand trembles as he raises his drink, a tremor that has nothing to do with alcohol and everything to do with the nerve damage from that night in Berlin when he held position for 6 hours in sub-zero temperatures to eliminate a double agent. "Just trying to forget, sir," he slurs carefully, his words carrying a hint of educated accent that he doesn't quite manage to hide. Kane's eyes narrow at that slip. "Educated man, are you? Bit far from Oxford here." He leans closer, his voice dropping. "Word is, you've been asking questions about my business dealings. Subtle questions, but questions nonetheless." Morrison blinked owlishly, but beneath the table, his scarred fingers calculated distances and angles. 5 men, all armed, trying hard not to look like they're carrying. The youngest one favors his left side. Recent injury, probably from their last property acquisition. "Must be a mistake," Morrison mumbles. "I just drink here. Don't mean no trouble." Kane grabs Morrison's glass, spilling scotch across the stained table. "Maybe trouble means you, old man. This is a dangerous neighborhood. Accidents happen to people who don't mind their own business." For just a moment, Morrison's facade cracks. Kane catches a glimpse of something in those bleary eyes, something cold and deadly, like looking into the scope of a sniper rifle. Then, it's gone, replaced by alcoholic confusion. "Sorry, sir. Very sorry," Morrison stammers, fumbling to mop up the spilled drink with his sleeve. "Won't happen again." Kane steps back, unsettled by that brief glimpse, but unwilling to show it. "See that it doesn't. Next time, we might have to help you with your drinking problem. Permanently." As Kane and his men leave, Morrison's hands stop shaking. His eyes, Now perfectly clear, track their movements with predatory focus. Old Tom approaches cautiously with a fresh drink. "You should leave town, Jimmy," the bartender whispers. "Kane's men, they're animals. Last week they put Charlie from the newsstand in hospital just for being slow with his payments." Morrison accepts the drink, but his voice has changed, dropping an octave and losing all trace of intoxication. "How many?" "What?" "How many people has Kane hurt? How many businesses has he destroyed?" Tom stares, hearing steel beneath silk in this suddenly unfamiliar voice. "Dozens. Police do nothing. He's got them bought. But why do you care?" Morrison doesn't answer immediately. He's thinking of another time, another city, when he watched evil men prey on the innocent and did nothing because his mission required silence. Not this time. Morrison spends the next hour in his rented room above the pub, methodically cleaning a collection of weapons that no mere drunk should possess. His shabby suitcase, when opened with a specific sequence of latches, reveals a false bottom containing tools of his former trade, a suppressed Walther PPK, lockpicks, surveillance equipment, and various other implements that hadn't seen daylight since he'd chosen this self-imposed exile. As he works, his mind drifts to the event that drove him into hiding, the Belgrade operation that went wrong. Not because he failed. James Ghost Morrison never failed. But because he succeeded too well, uncovering a web of corruption that reached into the highest levels of British intelligence. When they tried to silence him, he did what he did best. He disappeared. A soft knock interrupts his thoughts. "Jimmy?" Old Tom's voice carries through the thin door. "There's someone here asking about Kane. Says it's important." Morrison quickly conceals his equipment. "Come in." The door opens to reveal Tom and a well-dressed older gentleman who carries himself with military bearing. "Colonel Richards," Morrison says without turning around. "I wondered when MI6 would find me." Tom's eyes widen, but Richards waves him away. "Give us a moment, please." Once they're alone, Richards speaks again. "You're a hard man to find, Ghost." That was the point. Morrison finally turns, all traces of the drunk gone. His eyes are sharp, predatory. "Why are you here?" Kane isn't just a thug. He's working for someone we've been watching. Viktor Petrov. The name sends a chill down Morrison's spine. 10 years ago in Moscow, he'd nearly caught the infamous arms dealer. Instead, Petrov had escaped, leaving 3 dead agents in his wake. "Petrov's using Kane's protection racket to fund something big," Richards continues. "Weapons shipments, mercenaries, all pointing to Operation Wolfhound," Morrison finishes. "The rumored Soviet plan to destabilize Western Europe through organized crime networks. I found evidence in Belgrade before they tried. To kill you, yes." Richards places a file on the table. "You were right about the corruption, by the way. We've spent 2 years cleaning the house. That's why I'm here. Kane's operation isn't just about territory, it's a test run. If it works in London, they'll replicate it across Europe." Morrison examines the file's contents, his tactical mind already analyzing patterns. "Why come to me? You have active agents." Richard's face darkens. 3 have disappeared in the last month. The last one managed to send a message. "Kane's got someone inside the agency. We need someone who's already a ghost, someone they think is broken." Morrison's laugh is cold. "And I've played the part so well, haven't I? The drunk who couldn't handle the job, drowning his sorrows in cheap scotch." "You've done more than that," Richards counters. "You've mapped their patterns, identified their weaknesses, all while appearing harmless, classic ghost." Morrison moves to the window, watching Kane's men harass a shopkeeper across the street. "I left that life for a reason, Colonel. And now that life is coming to your doorstep. Kane's just the beginning. If Petrov succeeds, every city in Europe will have men like him, backed by Soviet money and muscle. How many innocents will suffer while you hide in your bottle?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The words hit home. Morrison thinks of old Tom's kindness, of the community these thugs are destroying. He'd chosen this pub for its strategic location, but somewhere along the way, these people had become more than just part of his cover. "If I do this," Morrison says finally, "I do it my way. No handlers, no backup, no paper trail." Richards nods, just like the old days. "The old days got a lot of good people killed." Morrison turns back to the window. "I'll need equipment. My own resources were compromised. Already arranged." Richards hands him a key. "Storage unit in Bethnal Green. Everything you need, plus files on Kane's organization. What they know about you." "They know nothing," Morrison interrupts. "They see what I want them to see, a broken man, harmless beneath their notice. That's how Ghost operates. The best predator is the one they never suspect. And now," Morrison's smile is razor-sharp, "now I remind them why they called me Ghost, not because I'm hard to find, but because by the time they know I'm there, they're already dead." The storage unit in Bethnal Green proves to be a treasure trove of intelligence. Morrison spends the night reviewing surveillance photos, financial records, and intercepted communications. Kane's operation is larger than he initially thought. Protection rackets are just the surface. Beneath runs a sophisticated network of arms, trafficking, money laundering, and political manipulation. What catches Morrison's eye is a series of photographs showing Kane meeting with a figure he recognizes, Anton Volkov, Petrov's right hand. A man. The Ghost had encountered him in Prague, though Volkov wouldn't remember. The Russian had been unconscious when Morrison extracted crucial intelligence from his safe. "Still favoring that knee, I see," Morrison mutters, noting Volkov's slight limp in the photos. A souvenir from their brief encounter, a blueprint catches his attention, the layout of Kane's primary base of operations, a supposedly abandoned warehouse in the dockyards. Morrison's trained eye spots the security measures, guard rotations, camera positions, potential blind spots. But something's off about the shipping manifests. The volume of cargo doesn't match the building's capacity. Underground, he realizes, they've expanded below. Dawn finds him back at the Blind Raven, resuming his drunk act as Kane's men make their morning rounds. This time, he notices details he'd overlooked. The way they communicate through subtle hand signals, their coordinated movements. These aren't just ex-military, they're special forces, probably Spetsnaz operating under deep cover. "More tea, Jimmy?" Old Tom sets a steaming cup before him, but his hands are shaking. Something's wrong. Morrison maintains his facade while scanning the room. There, a new face at the bar, too still, too watchful, and outside, a black sedan. "That's passed by 3 times in the last hour. They came asking about you," Tom whispers. "Last night, after closing. Professional types, not Kane's usual thugs. Show me a photograph. You, younger, in uniform." Morrison's mind races. If they're showing his military photo, they haven't made the connection to Ghost yet. Still, the net is tightening. "Your daughter," Morrison slurs, loud enough to be heard. "The one in Manchester. Maybe time to visit her, eh?" Tom pales, understanding. "She did invite me last week." "Go," Morrison says softly. "Today. Don't tell me where. Don't come back until you hear it's safe." The watcher at the bar signals subtly to someone outside. Morrison counts 4 more operatives taking positions around the pub. They're good. Anyone else would miss the signs, but he'd trained the men who trained these men. Time to change the game. Morrison stumbles to his feet, weaving toward the bathroom. Inside, he quickly picks the lock on the window. By the time the watcher checks on him, the bathroom is empty, the window closed but unlocked. They'll expect him to run, to seek distance. Instead, Morrison slips into the pub's cellar through a trapdoor behind the bar. A route he'd prepared. Weeks ago, Through gaps in the floorboards, he watches the operation unfold. Clear, voices above as they search the building. He can't have gone far. A familiar voice. Volkov. Find him. The ghost can't be allowed to interfere. Morrison smiles in the darkness. They know who he is now, but they still don't understand. Ghost doesn't run. Ghost hunts, using the cellar's old smuggling tunnels, a relic from the pub's days. As a World War II resistance point, Morrison emerges 2 streets away. From here, he can see Kane's men mobilizing, expanding their search pattern. They're preparing for a manhunt, expecting him to go to ground. Instead, he heads for the warehouse. While they hunt a ghost, he'll hit them where it hurts. But first, a stop at a particular lockup in Whitechapel. Inside waits his true arsenal, not just weapons, but the tools that earned him his reputation. Specialized electronics, surveillance equipment of his own design, and most importantly, the custom-made infiltration gear that had helped him penetrate some of the most secure facilities in Europe. As he gears up, Morrison reflects on the irony. For 3 months, he's played the drunk, running from his past. Now that same past might be the only thing that can save this community from Kane's ambitions and whatever Petrov has planned. Time to remind them, he mutters, checking his equipment. Why, Ghost was the only operative who never needed extraction. The warehouse looms against the darkening sky, its rusted facade concealing state-of-the-art security systems. Morrison observes from a neighboring rooftop, using specialized optics to track guard patterns. His earlier assessment was correct. These are Spetsnaz operators, moving with the disciplined precision he remembers from Cold War encounters. What interests him more is the traffic pattern. Every hour, a truck arrives through the south entrance, but the cargo manifests he'd studied don't account for this frequency. More importantly, the truck's suspension suggests they're leaving heavier. Then they arrive, weapons in, something else out, he mutters, making notes in a worn leather notebook, the same one he'd used in Belgrade, its pages filled with the evidence that had forced him into hiding. A burst of radio chatter catches his attention. Through his directional microphone, he picks up fragments. Ghost, priority target, shoot on sight. Morrison allows himself a grim smile. They're scared, and scared men make mistakes. The next truck arrives right on schedule. Morrison watches the inspection procedure through his scope. Armed guards check the vehicle thoroughly, but only from ground level. Amateur mistake. He'd hidden in worse places than a truck's undercarriage. Getting in proves almost disappointingly easy. These men are trained for direct combat, not counterintelligence. They never think to check the maintenance tunnel that runs beneath the street, a remnant of London's Victorian infrastructure that Morrison had mapped weeks ago. Inside, the warehouse, the true scope of Kane's operation becomes clear. The ground floor is a legitimate shipping business, but beneath, Morrison emerges from a ventilation shaft into a sophisticated arms facility. Rows of crates bear Cyrillic markings, Soviet military hardware, everything from small arms to specialized equipment. Impressive, isn't it? A voice behind him. Morrison doesn't turn, doesn't reach for his weapon. He knows that voice. Anatoly Kriegin, former KGB wetworks specialist. They'd crossed paths in East Berlin, though Kriegin had never seen his face. The ghost himself, Kriegin continues, though you look different from your file photos. Less military. People change, Morrison replies, his voice carrying the practiced slur of his drunk persona. You'd know about that, wouldn't you, Anatoly? Trading the KGB for private enterprise? He hears the slight shift in Krigin's stance, surprised that Morrison knows his name. Good, keep him talking. The KGB is yesterday's news, Krigin says. Petrov understands the future. When the Soviet Union falls, and it will fall, men like us need new employment. Men like us. Morrison lets contempt color his voice. I never sold out to the highest bidder. No, Krigan agrees. You just disappeared, hiding in a bottle while the world changes. But now... Morrison hears the smile. In his voice, "Now you're interested in our operation. Why?" Morrison finally turns. Cregan stands flanked by two guards, both covering him with suppressed submachine guns. Professional stance, fingers on triggers but not tense. "They're good." "Maybe I got bored," Morrison slurs. "Maybe I missed the game." Cregan laughs. "The great Ghost reduced to this. You know what I think? I think Belgrade broke you. When you discovered the truth about your own people, it shattered that righteous patriotism you were so famous for." The guards shift slightly, responding to some signal. Morrison catalogues their positions automatically. Distance, angles, likely reactions. This is why they called him Ghost. Not because he could disappear, but because he could read a room like a blueprint, mapping every possibility before anyone knew he was there. "You're right about one thing," Morrison says. "Belgrade did change me, made me realize something important." "And what's that?" Morrison's hand moves, almost too fast to track. The flashbang he'd palmed earlier skitters across the floor. "It taught me to always have a backup plan. The explosion is deafening in the confined space." Morrison moves before the guards can recover, his muscle memory overriding years of pretend. Weakness? The first guard goes down to a precise strike to the throat, his weapon clattering away. The second manages to fire, but Morrison is already inside his guard, redirecting the burst into the ceiling. Cregan proves faster than expected, drawing a pistol from his shoulder holster, but he hesitates for a crucial second. His trained instincts, fighting against the image of the broken drunk before him. That hesitation costs him. Morrison disarms him with a move he'd learned from a Chinese master in Hong Kong, following through with an elbow strike that sends Cregan sprawling. "You know what else Belgrade taught me?" Morrison says, standing over the fallen operative. "It taught me that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one pointing a gun at you. It's the one you think you've already beaten." Cregan spits, blood reaching for a hidden blade. "You're too late. The shipments have already begun. Petrov's plan will fail." Morrison interrupts. "Just like you failed to notice I've been recording this entire conversation." He holds up a small device disguised as a button. "Old CIA tech. Amazing what you can find in abandoned safe houses if you know where to look." Alarms blare through the warehouse complex as Morrison secures Cregan with his own handcuffs. The Russians' confession won't be enough on its own, but combined with the evidence he's gathered, it's a start. The sound of boots on metal stairs tells him Kane's men are responding to the disturbance. Time to disappear. But first, Morrison quickly searches Cregan, finding what he expected: a security keycard and a small notebook. The notebook's contents are encoded, but he recognizes the cipher system, old-school KGB, the kind they taught. At the Moscow Center before the digital age. "Amateur, you won't get out," Cregan spits. "The Ghost may be good, but even you can't fight your way through 50 trained operatives." Morrison allows himself a small smile. "Who said anything about fighting?" He produces a small remote detonator. "Remember East Berlin? The warehouse fire that destroyed those compromised SDV files?" Cregan's eyes widened. "That was you." "I had 3 hours to clear the building before the fire teams arrived. This time..." Morrison checks his watch. "I've given myself 10 minutes. Understanding dawns on Cregan's face. "You've already planted charges. 2 days ago, while your men were chasing a drunk through the East End." Morrison moves to the computer terminal, inserting a specialized drive. Amazing how invisible a man becomes when people think they know what he is. The drive begins copying data: shipping manifests, contact lists, financial records. Everything needed to expose not just Kane's operation, but Petrov's entire network. On another screen, security camera feeds show Kane's men establishing a perimeter, preparing for a siege. "Even if you get out," Cregan says, "Petrov will find you. He has resources you can't imagine." Morrison continues working while he talks, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Like the resources he used in Prague or Istanbul?" He glances at Cregan. Did he ever tell you about his operation there? How did his perfect plan fall apart? Cregan's silence is answer enough. Morrison continues. 3 years of preparation, millions in bribes and equipment, 47 highly trained operatives, all undone in one night. They never even saw who did it. That's just a story, Cregan says, but doubt creeps into his voice. Urban legend among the intelligence community. Is it? Morrison holds up Cregan's notebook. Because according to this, Petrov's running the same playbook, same infrastructure, same shell companies. His smile turns predatory. Same weaknesses. And high. Explosion rocks the building, but not from Morrison's charges. Through the security feeds, he watches Kane's men engage with new arrivals, government plates on their vehicles, tactical gear that speaks of serious training. MI5, Cregan realizes. You called them? No, Morrison says, pocketing the flash drive. They followed your men when they started hunting me. Standard protocol when foreign operatives go active in London. He checks his watch again. 7 minutes until the charges blow. Should be interesting to see who gets to you first. Another explosion, closer this time. Gunfire echoes through the warehouse. Morrison retrieves a small package from his hidden equipment cache. Documents, photographs, and a recorded conversation between Kane and Petrov discussing their plans for London. Insurance, he tells Cregan. In case something happens to the digital files. He places the package inside a pneumatic tube, the kind used in old office buildings. This one, unknown to Kane's men, connects to a drop point 3 blocks away. You planned all this, Cregan says with dawning comprehension. The drunk act, getting caught in the warehouse. You wanted us to find you. I needed access to your inner circle, Morrison confirms. Needed to confirm the connection between Kane and Petrov. Staging my own capture was the fastest way. He starts typing rapidly on the terminal. Though I admit, I didn't expect you to be here personally. That's a bonus. The computer beeps. Data transfer complete. Morrison pockets the drive and retrieves his weapons. The ghost doesn't just gather intelligence, Anatoly. He makes sure it reaches the right people. Like you did in Belgrade? Cregan sneers. How did that work out? Morrison's expression hardens. Belgrade taught me to have multiple contingencies. The evidence isn't just going to MI5. Right now, copies are being sent to every major intelligence agency in Europe, along with select journalists, I trust. Even if Petrov's people manage to suppress one leak, they can't stop them all, Cregan finishes, finally understanding the trap they've walked into. The building shakes again as MI5's tactical teams breach the lower levels. Morrison checks his watch one final time. 5 minutes. Should be just enough time to reach the minimum safe distance. He moves to the ventilation shaft he'd entered through. A piece of advice? When they question you, tell them everything. Petrov doesn't tolerate loose ends, and prison is safer than what he'll do when he learns you talk to me. They'll find you, Cregan calls after him. However this ends, they'll never stop hunting the ghost. Morrison pauses at the shaft entrance. That's where you're wrong, Anatoly. The ghost isn't a person. It's what happens when good men are pushed, and too far. And as long as there are people like Petrov and Kane in the world, he disappears into the darkness. There will always be ghosts hunting them. As Morrison navigates the ventilation system, he listens to the chaos unfolding below. MI5 teams engaging with Kane's men, the sounds of room-to-room clearing operations. His charges won't destroy the building. That was never the plan. They're strategically placed to destroy specific evidence, creating enough confusion for the ghost to disappear once again. Morrison emerges from the tunnel network 3 blocks away, just as his charges detonate. The explosions are precise, surgical, targeting computer systems, weapons caches, and specifically marked shipping containers. Through his earpiece, he monitors the chaos on police and MI5 frequencies as they try to contain the situation. Multiple suspects in custody, a clipped voice reports, including Marcus Kane and several known Soviet operatives. Morrison allows himself a moment of satisfaction before focusing on his next target. Kane's capture is just the beginning. Petrov is still out there, and the ghost's work isn't finished. The safe house he maintains in Whitechapel, unknown even to his former MI6 handlers, provides everything he needs for the next phase. As he changes out of his tactical gear, Morrison reviews what he's learned. The shipping manifests, Cregan's notebook, the recorded conversations, all point to something bigger than arms trafficking. Project Wolfsbane, he mutters, studying the decoded entries from Cregan's notes. The operation in London isn't just a test run, it's a dress rehearsal. Petrov plans to replicate Kane's takeover across every major European city using criminal networks to destabilize governments from within. A knock at the door interrupts his thoughts. Morrison's hand moves to his weapon, but the pattern of knocks is familiar, an old MI6 recognition signal. "Clear," Colonel Richards's voice calls softly. Morrison opens the door, weapon ready despite the recognition code. Trust, but verify. A lesson learned painfully in Belgrade. Richards enters alone, taking in the safe house's sparse furnishings and wall of surveillance photographs. "You've been busy," Richards observes. "MI5 is having a field day with the evidence you provided." Kane's singing like a canary, trying to save himself from extradition. "Cregan, requesting protective custody, says Petrov will send cleaners once he learns what was compromised." Richards produces a flask, offering it to Morrison. "You're not really an alcoholic, are you?" Morrison ignores the flask, focusing on his wall of evidence. "The drunk was a cover, needed Kane's men to underestimate me while I mapped their operation. But Petrov's the real target." About that, Richards sits heavily in Morrison's lone chair. "The evidence you uncovered, it goes higher than we thought. Petrov isn't just working with criminal networks. He's got connections in NATO, the UN, Security Council, even British intelligence," Morrison finishes. "Just like Belgrade." Richards nods grimly. "The cleanup I mentioned, it wasn't complete. Some of Petrov's people survived the purge, went dormant. Now they're active again, helping coordinate Project Wolfsbane from inside Western intelligence agencies." Morrison processes this, his tactical mind already formulating plans. "That's why you really came to find me. Not just because I was close to Kane's operation, but because you don't know who to trust in your own organization." "The Ghost was always our best solo operative," Richards confirms. "No handler, no support team, no electronic trail. A ghost in every sense. Until Belgrade." "Until Belgrade," Richards agrees. "But maybe that's what we need now. Someone who's seen the corruption firsthand, who knows how deep it goes." He stands, moving to examine the surveillance photos. "Kane's operation gave us names, evidence. But Petrov's still out there, and his network is vulnerable," Morrison interrupts. "He thinks he's won, thinks Belgrade broke me, turned me into a real drunk hiding in the East End." A cold smile crosses his face. "That's why I let his people find me. Let them think they knew what the Ghost had become." Richards raises an eyebrow. "And what has the Ghost become?" Morrison moves to his equipment table, beginning to check and load his weapons with practiced efficiency. "Something they never expected. In Belgrade, I was just doing my job. Now," he examines a specially modified pistol, one designed for absolute silence. "Now it's personal. You'll need resources," Richard says. "Support?" "No," Morrison's voice is firm. "I work alone, always have. The moment I start trusting the system again is the moment Petrov's people can track me. The Ghost operates in shadows, no backup, no safety net." "And the Blind Raven? The community you protected from Kane?" Morrison pauses in his preparations. Sometimes a ghost needs a haunt, somewhere to gather intelligence, to watch for patterns. Kane's operation showed me how Petrov thinks, how he operates. Now it's time to take that knowledge and go hunting. What's your next move? Instead of answering, Morrison retrieves a familiar case from beneath a floorboard. Inside lies specialized equipment, tools for infiltration, surveillance, and, if necessary, elimination. The tools that earned him his reputation. The thing about ghosts, Morrison says finally, is that they don't just haunt places, they haunt people. Petrov's about to learn that the hard way. 3 days after the warehouse raid, Petrov's organization begins to unravel. His contacts start disappearing, not dead, but thoroughly compromised. Bank accounts frozen, safe houses exposed, escape routes blocked. Each loss is surgical, precise, executed with the kind of expertise that leaves no trace but speaks volumes. To those who know where to look. In his Vienna penthouse, Viktor Petrov reviews the latest reports with growing unease. 7 operations suspended, 13 key personnel arrested, and millions in assets seized, all without a single shot fired. Ghost, he mutters, studying surveillance photos from London. The drunk from the Blind Raven stares back at him. But now Petrov sees what he missed before, the careful positioning, the 2 perfect stumbles, the eyes that saw everything while appearing to see nothing. A knock at his door. Enter! His security. Chief Stefan appears pale and agitated. Sir, Paris has gone dark, our entire network compromised, and Berlin... He swallows hard. The BND just arrested our banking contacts. Someone knew exactly where to look, what evidence to provide. Not someone, Petrov corrects. Something. A ghost from the past that never really died. He turns to his wall safe, entering the complex combination. Get me Dmitri. Tell him to activate the contingency protocol. But Stefan doesn't move. Dmitri was arrested an hour ago in London. They found him at one of our backup sites, a location only 5 people knew existed. Petrov freezes, his hand on the safe door. Which site? The King's Cross facility. A chill runs down Petrov's spine. That particular safe house had been his personal insurance, a cache of evidence against his political allies, meant to ensure their cooperation. If Dmitri was caught there... How long? Petrov demands. Sir? How long has the ghost been hunting us? Really hunting us? Not playing drunk in that pathetic pub? Stefan consults his notebook. According to our analysis, the groundwork was laid months ago. The East End operation, Kane's protection racket. He used it to map our entire European network. Every connection, every safe house, every escape route. Petrov slams his fist on the desk, and we gave him exactly what he needed. Kane's men watching him, following him, reporting every detail of his apparent breakdown. He laughs bitterly. We built our own trap, thinking we were the hunters. The lights in the penthouse flicker, then die. Emergency power kicks in, bathing. The room in red light. Stefan reaches for his weapon, but Petrov waves him down. It's too late for that. A familiar voice emerges from the shadows. Morrison steps into view, no longer playing the drunk. His movements are fluid, predatory. Hello, Victor. It's been a while. Ghost. Petrov maintains his composure, though his hand inches toward the desk drawer containing his pistol. I must admit you played your role perfectly. The broken operative drowning his sorrows, even I believed it. That's because part of it was true, Morrison replies, moving further into the room. Stefan backs away, weapon drawn but unsure. Belgrade did break something in me, made me realize how deep the corruption went, how many so-called patriots were really working for men like you. Men like me? Petrov spreads his hands. I'm a businessman, nothing more. The world is changing, Ghost. The old ideologies are dying. I simply profit from the chaos by destroying communities, turning cities into war zones. Morrison's voice carries an edge of steel. Kane was just the beginning, wasn't he? Project Wolfsbane, your blueprint for turning Europe into a battlefield. Petrov's eyes narrow. You've been busy, I learned. From the best. Years of watching men like you operate, seeing how you think. Morrison produces a small device, a signal jammer, cutting off any possibility of outside communication. That's why the Drunk Act worked so perfectly. You never questioned it because it fit your world view. The righteous spy, broken by betrayal. Exactly the kind of story men like you love to believe. And now, Petrov's hand closes around his hidden weapon. You'll what? Arrest me? Turn me over to your former masters? Morrison's laugh is cold. You still don't understand? I'm not here as an operative, not here for Queen and country. He moves with deadly purpose. I'm here as a ghost, the thing that haunts men like you, that remembers every life you've destroyed, every community you've torn apart. Stefan makes his move first, but Morrison is already in motion. The security chief's shot goes wide as Morrison closes the distance, disarming him with a technique learned in a Kyoto dojo decades ago. Stefan drops unconscious before he hits the floor. Petrov fires from his desk drawer, but Morrison has anticipated this too. He rolls behind an antique armchair as bullets tear into expensive upholstery. You can't win this, Ghost, Petrov calls out. Even if you take me down, the operation continues. Project Wolfsbane is bigger than one man. You're right, Morrison replies, his voice seeming to come from multiple directions, an old spy trick involving carefully placed microspeakers. That's why I'm not just here for you. Petrov's computer chimes. On the screen, documents begin opening automatically. Financial records, communication logs, blackmail material. Everything that made Petrov untouchable is being systematically uploaded to intelligence agencies worldwide. Impossible, Petrov breathes. This system is isolated. Air-gapped was isolated, Morrison corrects. You should screen your cleaning staff more carefully. That new night janitor last week, former MI6 cyber operative. Amazing what access a mop badge provides. Petrov fires again, emptying his magazine toward Morrison's last known position. But the chair is empty. The ghost has vanished. Your empire's falling, Victor. Kane was just the beginning. While you were watching me play drunk in London, my real operation was targeting your entire network. A shadow moves to Petrov's left. He spins, but too late. Morrison disarms him with cold efficiency. Those compromised agents you lost? Not random. Arrests, each one carefully chosen, each piece of evidence planted weeks ago. A domino effect designed to lead to this moment. Petrov backs away, his legendary composure cracking. What do you want? Want? Morrison advances. I want you to understand something. Belgrade wasn't your victory. It was your mistake. You showed me how deep the corruption went, how men like you had infected everything I once believed in. So, this is revenge? Petrov tries to circle toward the door, but Morrison's positioning blocks his escape routes. No, Victor, this is surgery, removing cancer before it spreads. Morrison produces a small recorder. Right now, every intelligence agency in Europe is receiving proof of Project Wolfsbane. Not just the criminal operations, but the political connections, the compromised officials, the entire network. Petrov's face darkens. They'll bury it. My contacts are already under investigation. Did you really think I'd leave anything to chance? The ghost doesn't just gather intelligence, Victor. He makes sure it's used properly. A commotion in the hallway. Heavy boots, tactical teams moving into position. Morrison glances at his watch. Right on schedule. Interpol's counter-terrorism unit. They're very interested in Project Wolfsbane, especially after receiving evidence of your planned attacks on European capitals. You've killed us all, Petrov snarls. My organization provided stability. Without us, Europe will tear itself apart. Morrison's laugh is cold. No, Victor. Men like you create chaos and call it stability. You destroy communities and call it progress. Kane showed me your playbook, how you turn neighborhoods into war zones, how you profit from suffering. The tactical team breaches the outer office. Petrov makes one last, desperate move, reaching for a hidden knife. Morrison redirects the attack with practiced ease, using Petrov's own momentum to slam him into his desk. The Ghost was never about winning wars or serving governments, Morrison says, securing Petrov with zip ties. It was about protecting people from men like you. That's what Belgrade taught me. Sometimes the real enemies aren't across borders. They're in boardrooms and back alleys, wearing suits instead of uniforms. The door bursts open as Interpol agents flood the room. Morrison steps back, fading into the shadows as they secure Petrov. His part in this operation is done, but the Ghost's work isn't finished. There will always be more men like Petrov, more communities needing protection. As he disappears through his pre-planned escape route, Morrison thinks about the blind raven, about old Tom, and the neighborhood Kane nearly destroyed. Sometimes the most effective weapon isn't a gun or a spy network. Sometimes it's simply being invisible enough to see the truth and stubborn enough to do something about it. The Ghost had learned that lesson in Belgrade, paid for it with his faith in the system. But he'd gained something too, a new purpose, a clearer vision of what really matters in the shadow war that never ends. 2 weeks after Petrov's arrest, Morrison sits in the Blind Raven, nursing a real drink for the first time in months. The pub has changed. Kane's operation is gone, and the community is slowly healing. Old Tom has returned from Manchester, his natural cheer restored now that the shadow over the neighborhood has lifted. "Strange seeing you without the act," Tom says, polishing glasses behind the bar. "Though I must admit, you played the drunk convincingly enough to fool even me." Morrison allows himself a small smile. Best disguises always contain a grain of truth. After Belgrade, I really did want to disappear into a bottle. Forget everything I've seen. What changed? Kane. Watching him terrorize this community, it reminded me why I became the Ghost in the first place. Morrison sips his whiskey, savoring the taste rather than using it as camouflage. Sometimes, the best way to fight corruption isn't from within the system. Sometimes, you have to become something else. The door opens, admitting Colonel Richards. He looks older, worn down by the revelations of the past weeks. 14, he says without preamble, taking the seat beside Morrison. 14 high-ranking intelligence officials across Europe, all compromised by Petrov's organization, the investigation still ongoing. And Project Wolf's Bane? Dismantled. Your evidence was thorough. Petrov's network is finished. Richards orders a drink. Though some interesting rumors are circulating, stories about a phantom operative targeting criminal organizations across the continent. They're calling him the Guardian Ghost. Morrison's expression doesn't change. Rumors are powerful things. Sometimes the idea of a watchful spirit is enough to make the corrupt think twice. Is that why you're still here? Richards asks, playing guardian angel to the East End. Before Morrison can answer, a commotion erupts outside. Through the window, they see a group of young men harassing an elderly shopkeeper. Not Kane's men. They're all in custody, but common thugs thinking they can fill the power vacuum. Morrison stands, his movement liquid and purposeful. "Excuse me, gentlemen. Seems some people need reminding that this neighborhood has protection. Need backup." Richards reaches for his phone. "The Ghost works alone," Morrison replies, but there's a hint of warmth in his voice. "Besides, these aren't hardened operatives, just bullies who haven't learned their lesson." Outside, the thugs have backed the shopkeeper against his storefront. Their leader, a muscled youth with brass knuckles, is demanding protection money, a pale imitation of Kane's operation. "Evening, lads," Morrison calls out, his voice carrying the slight slur of his drunk persona. "Old habits die hard." Might want to reconsider your career choices. The thugs turn, sizing him up. They see what he wants them to see. An aging man, slightly unsteady, no obvious threat. Mind your business, old man, the leader sneers. Unless you want some trouble yourself. Morrison sighs. Some lessons have to be taught the hard way. His stance shifts subtly, years of training ready beneath the facade of weakness. Last chance to walk away. This neighborhood's seen enough trouble. The first thug charges, brass knuckles gleaming. Morrison moves with the fluid grace that earned him his nickname, redirecting the attack with minimal effort. The youth stumbles, his own momentum sending him sprawling. What the hell? Another thug pulls a knife, but Morrison is already inside his guard. A precise strike numbs the knife hand. Two more thugs rush him simultaneously. A mistake. Morrison flows between them like smoke, using their own attacks against each other. In 30 seconds, it's over. Four would-be criminals lay groaning on the pavement, their weapons scattered, their bravado shattered. The East End has a protector now, Morrison tells them, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. Spread the word. The ghost doesn't just haunt Soviet agents and arms dealers. He watches over his own. Inside the blind raven, Richards observes through the window, not exactly keeping a low profile, he comments as Morrison returns. Sometimes the best way to prevent violence is to show potential troublemakers the consequences. Morrison replies, reclaiming his seat. Kane's operation taught me that communities don't just need shadow warriors. They need visible guardians too. And the real ghost? The one that has Europe's criminal underworld looking over their shoulders? Morrison's smile is enigmatic. Oh, he's still out there, hunting in the shadows, protecting the innocent. After all, he raises his glass in a toast. Every neighborhood needs a good ghost story. A month passes and the whispers grow. Stories spread through Europe's criminal underworld about an invisible operative dismantling illegal operations with surgical precision. Some say he's MI6, others claim he's a rogue. CIA agent. The truth, as always, is more complicated. Morrison maintains his cover at the Blind Raven, but now it's more headquarters than hiding place. In the pub's back room, he's established a sophisticated command center, monitoring criminal activities. Across the continent, the drunk act is retired, replaced by the carefully crafted persona of a quiet pub regular, memorable enough not to arouse suspicion, forgettable enough to move freely. Another one down, he mutters, marking off a location on his wall map. Another of Petrov's former lieutenants trying to rebuild the network under a new name. The ghost had visited him last night, leaving behind enough evidence for Interpol to make a clean arrest. A knock at the door, the special pattern that only 5 people know. Enter. It's Sarah Chen, former MI6 cyber specialist, now officially retired, but actually one of Morrison's most valuable assets. You were right about the Swiss accounts, she says without preamble. Petrov's organization was just the tip of the iceberg. I've found similar patterns in banks across Europe. Morrison studies the data on her tablet. They're adapting, learning from Petrov's mistakes, smaller cells, better compartmentalization, but still vulnerable, Sarah finishes. They haven't figured out how you dismantled Petrov's network so thoroughly. They think it was just good intelligence work, not a ghost in their machine. Morrison allows himself a grim smile. Let them keep guessing. Fear of the unknown is a powerful weapon. The door opens again, old Tom looking concerned. You've got visitors, Jimmy. Official types. Morrison checks his security feeds. 3 men in expensive suits, government cars outside. He recognizes under Sebastian Hayes, Deputy Director of MI5's Counterintelligence Division. Send them up, Morrison decides. Sarah, use the back exit. This might get complicated. Hayes enters first, flanked by his subordinates. His expression suggests this isn't a social call. Mr. Morrison, or should I say ghost, Jimmy's fine, Morrison replies mildly. What can I do for MI5 today? Cut the act, Hayes snaps. We know what you've been doing. The vigilante operations across Europe, the unauthorized intelligence gathering. Unauthorized? Morrison raises an eyebrow. I wasn't aware private citizens needed authorization to report criminal activity. This is serious, Hayes produces a folder. 3 weeks ago, someone compromised our secure servers, accessed files on protected operations, officers in deep cover. Sounds like you have a security problem. We have a ghost problem, Hayes corrects. Your fingerprints are all over this. The techniques, the precision, just like Belgrade. Morrison's expression hardens at the mention of Belgrade. Careful, Deputy Director, you're straying into dangerous territory. Am I? Hayes opens the folder. Because our investigation suggests Belgrade wasn't what we thought. The corruption you uncovered, some of it traced back to MI5. And now you're worried what else I might find? Morrison's voice carries a hint of steel. How deep the rot really go? Hayes glances at his men, then lowers his voice. We want to make a deal. Your skills, your methods, they could be valuable to us. Official sanction, resources, a chance to do things legally, like you did in Belgrade. Morrison stands, his movement fluid and dangerous. How many good agents died because your official channels were compromised? How many operations failed because the wrong people had access to the right information? That was different. No, Morrison interrupts. It wasn't. Men like Petrov don't succeed without help from inside the system. That's why the ghost exists. To hunt the predators that hide behind badges and bureaucracy. We can shut you down, Hayes threatens. Expose your operation, freeze your assets. Morrison's laugh is cold. You can try, but ask yourself something first. Who really has more to lose, the ghost that doesn't officially exist, or the intelligence agency that failed to stop Petrov's network until a vigilante did their job for them? The tension in the room is palpable. Hayes's men shift uneasily, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Morrison appears relaxed, but his eyes mark distances, angles, potential weapons, old habits that never die. Think about my offer, Hayes says finally. You can't operate alone forever. I already gave my life to the system once, Morrison replies. Watched good people die because of political games and corrupt officials. The ghost works alone for a reason. After they leave, Morrison returns to his wall of intelligence. Hayes's visit confirms what he suspected. The corruption that led to Belgrade still exists, hiding in the shadows of official power. But now, the ghost has a new mission, a clearer purpose. In the pub below, life goes on. The East End is healing, protected by its own special guardian. But in the shadows of Europe, a new kind of war continues, fought not with armies or spies, but with secrets and silence, waged by a ghost who remembers everything and forgives nothing. Late autumn brings change to the East End. The leaves turn golden, and with them, the last traces of Kane's influence fade from the streets. But for Morrison, watching from his window above the blind raven, the work never ends. Sarah's intelligence network has identified 3 more Petrov-connected operations attempting to establish footholds in European cities. Berlin, Amsterdam, and Madrid, she reports, laying out surveillance photos. They're learning, adapting, smaller cells, better security protocols, still using the Project Wolfsbane framework, but with modifications. Morrison studies the photos. With practiced eyes, they're afraid. Look at the security patterns, multiple layers, redundant systems. They're not just protecting against law enforcement. They're protecting against ghosts, Sarah finishes. Your reputation is spreading. The underground's calling you the Phantom Executioner now. Bit dramatic, Morrison muses, but there's purpose in his voice. Still, fear can be useful, makes them sloppy, prone to mistakes. An encrypted message flashes on Sarah's laptop. Colonel Richards using their secure channel. The text is brief but urgent. Belgrade files declassified. It's worse than we thought. Meet at your usual place. Morrison checks his watch. Keep monitoring the European operations. I need to know if they change patterns or protocols. You think Belgrade's still active? Sarah's expression is concerned. After all this time, some ghosts never rest, Morrison replies cryptically, retrieving his coat, and some secrets don't stay buried. The usual place is an abandoned underground station, closed since the war. Morrison arrives through his own route. Maintenance, tunnels and forgotten passages that don't appear on any official maps. Richards is already there, looking haggard in the dim emergency lighting. Read this. Richards hands over a thick file. All of it. Morrison scans the documents, his expression darkening with each page. Project Echo. It was never about Soviet intelligence, was it? The whole operation was a cover. For something much bigger, Richards confirms. Petrov wasn't just building a criminal empire. He was creating a shadow government, sleeper agents in every major European institution, waiting for the right moment to seize control. And Belgrade was a test run. When you uncovered their operation there, exposed the corruption, you weren't just burning one network. You were exposing a decades-long conspiracy. Morrison processes this, his tactical mind assembling pieces of a puzzle that's haunted him for years. That's why they tried to kill me. Not to silence me, but to prevent me from seeing the whole picture. Exactly, but here's the real bombshell. Petrov wasn't the mastermind. He was middle management, the real power. Richards produces another document, this one bearing highest-level security classifications. Operation Lazarus, Morrison reads. Initiated 1945, my God. A contingency plan. Created in the dying days of World War II, a network of influential figures, industrialists, politicians, intelligence officers, positioning themselves to manipulate the Cold War from both sides. Morrison's mind races. The Soviet operations, the criminal networks, Project Wolfsbane, they're all just pieces of a larger mechanism. And it's still active, Richards confirms grimly. Petrov's arrest exposed one branch, but the root goes deeper. They're planning something big, Ghost, something that makes Project Wolfsbane look like a dress rehearsal. Morrison stands, moving to the platform's edge. In the darkness of the tunnel, he can almost see the shadows of his past. Belgrade, Prague, all the operations that seemed disconnected, but were actually part of a grand design. They'll come for you, he tells Richards. Once they realize you've shared this information, already taken care of. I've got a plane to Argentina tonight, new identity, clean background. Richards manages a tired smile. Learned a few tricks from you over the years. What about Hayes? MI5. Compromised, most likely, though he might not even know it. That's the brilliance of Operation Lazarus. Most of its assets don't realize they're assets. Morrison absorbs this, already formulating plans. I'll need everything you have, every file, every connection, every suspected operative. It's all in there, Richards gestures to the file. But Ghost, this isn't like Petrov's network. These people, they've had decades to embed themselves in the system. They're patient, careful. So am I. Morrison's voice carries absolute certainty. You know what they called me in Belgrade? The man who hunts shadows? Time to live up to that name. Richards hands Morrison a small device, an advanced encryption key. One more thing. This connects to a secure server in Geneva. If anything happens to me, it won't, Morrison asserts, but pockets the key anyway. The server contains everything I've gathered over the past 30 years. Names, operations, money trails. I've been building my own shadow network, Ghost, watching the watchers. Morrison studies his old handler with new respect. You've been hunting them too. In my own way. Less dramatic than your methods, but... Richard shrugs. Someone had to. Keep the records, maintain the evidence. When you disappeared after Belgrade, I knew someday we'd need it. A distant sound echoes through the tunnels. Footsteps, multiple sets. Morrison tenses, but Richards remains calm. Right on schedule, the colonel says. My protection detail, though they don't know that's what they are. Good men, but potentially compromised. Morrison finishes. You need to go. The less they see us together, the better. Richards moves toward the service exit, but pauses. Ghost, when you find them, the people behind Lazarus, they'll face justice, Morrison promises, one way or another. After Richards departs, Morrison remains in the shadows, watching as the protection detail searches the platform. Their movements are too precise, their coordination too perfect. Not regular agents, special operations, probably from the same unit that tried to eliminate him in Belgrade. Once they leave, Morrison retrieves his phone, sending a coded message to Sarah. Begin Protocol Winter, full-spectrum surveillance on Hayes and his division. The reply comes quickly. Already on it. You need to see this. Facial recognition got a hit. One of Hayes's men was in Belgrade. He was there the night they tried to kill you. Morrison's expression hardens. The pieces are falling into place, forming a picture darker than even he imagined. Operation Lazarus isn't just a conspiracy, it's an infection spreading through. The very institutions meant to protect democracy. But now the Ghost has a new mission. Not just protecting neighborhoods or dismantling criminal networks, but hunting the ultimate predators, the ones who hide behind authority, who twist justice to serve their own ends. As he navigates the tunnel system back to the Blind Raven, Morrison allows himself a grim smile. They thought Belgrade had broken him, turned him into a drunk hiding from his past. Instead, it had forged him into something new, a phantom who hunts other phantoms, a ghost who haunts the guilty. The game is changing, the stakes rising, but that's fine with Morrison. After all, every ghost has its purpose. His just happens to be justice. Dawn breaks over London's East End, painting the sky in shades of steel and gold. Morrison stands at his window above the Blind Raven, watching his neighborhood come to life. 6 months have passed since the revelation of Operation Lazarus, 6 months of hunting shadows within shadows. Sarah's voice breaks his contemplation. 4 more arrests overnight. Hamburg, Paris, Rome. The Lazarus network is unraveling. And Hayes? In custody. MI5's internal affairs found enough evidence to move against him and his entire division. The encrypted files from Richards's server proved invaluable. Morrison nods, his attention drawn to the wall of intelligence that has grown to cover an entire room. Photographs, documents, connection maps, the anatomy of a conspiracy decades in the making. But now, finally, the end is in sight. What about the Geneva meeting? He asks, though he already knows the answer. Sarah's smile is predatory. Confirmed, the remaining Lazarus leadership is gathering tomorrow night. All the major players in one place, trying to salvage what's left of their operation. They're scared, Morrison observes, making mistakes, meeting in person instead of maintaining their usual protocols. Can you blame them? The Ghost has been haunting their networks for months, their best operatives disappearing, their secure communications compromised, their secrets exposed to the world. Morrison moves to his equipment table, checking his specialized gear one final time. They still don't understand. Even now, they think this is about intelligence agencies, about governments and power plays. Isn't it? No, Morrison's voice carries absolute certainty. This was never about politics or power. It's about justice, about protecting people from those who'd sacrifice them for profit and control. A knock at the door. Old Tom carrying a package. Special delivery from the Colonel. Arrived just now through our usual channels. Inside the package, Morrison finds what he needs: security passes for the Geneva Conference Center, building schematics, guard rotations. Richards might be officially retired in Argentina, but his network remains active, serving the cause of justice from the shadows. You're really going to do this? Tom asks. Take on the entire Lazarus leadership alone. Morrison's smile is cold. Not alone. Never alone. The ghost has friends everywhere now. Ordinary people who've had enough of shadows controlling their lives. Sarah's laptop chimes. More intelligence coming in. Confirmation from our assets in Geneva. 23 high-level Lazarus operatives expected at the meeting. Security will be heavy. Good. Morrison begins his final preparations. Let them bring their guards, their protocols, their illusion of safety. The ghost works best when they think they're secure. As night falls, Morrison makes his rounds through the East End one last time. The neighborhood has changed since his arrival as a pretend drunk. Kane's thugs are long gone, Petrov's network dismantled. But more importantly, the community has found its strength, learned to stand together against those who would prey on them. You've done good work here, old Tom says as Morrison returns to the Blind Raven. Give people hope again. The work's not finished, Morrison replies. Lazarus is just one head of the Hydra. There will always be others, always powerful men, trying to control through fear and corruption. And there will always be ghosts to haunt them, Sarah adds. Your legend has spread, inspired others. The underground whispers about shadow warriors protecting the innocent, bringing justice to those who think they're above it. Morrison checks his weapons one final time. Then let's give them one last story to tell. The night the ghost brought down an empire of shadows. As he prepares to leave for Geneva, Morrison pauses at his window, looking out over the East End. He thinks of Belgrade, of the broken man who'd hidden here playing drunk. That man had lost his faith in the system, in justice itself, but he'd found something else, a new purpose, a clearer mission. The best ghosts, he tells Sarah and Tom, aren't the ones that haunt old buildings or rattle chains. They're the ones that haunt the conscience, that remind the powerful that their sins have consequences. Sarah hands him his final piece of equipment, a specialized phone containing every piece of evidence they've gathered about Operation Lazarus. The files are ready to transmit to every major news agency and intelligence service in the world. Once you give the signal, the truth comes out, Morrison finishes. All of it. No more shadows, no more secrets. And after? Old Tom asks. What happens to the ghost? Morrison's smile is enigmatic. Ghosts never really die, Tom. They just find new haunts, new battles to fight. There will always be powerful men who need reminding that they're not untouchable. Always be communities that need protection. He shoulders his equipment bag, checking the time. His flight to Geneva leaves in 2 hours, but the ghost's real journey began months ago in a dingy pub where a broken operative found his purpose again. Keep a light on, he tells his friends. The East End's protector will return. After all, his smile turns predatory. Every neighborhood needs its ghost stories. As Morrison disappears into the London night, Sarah and Tom share a knowing look. The legend of the ghost will grow after tonight, spread through whispered conversations in back alleys and boardrooms. A phantom that hunts the wicked, that brings justice to those who think themselves beyond its reach. But in the East End, they'll remember something else. The quiet man who taught them that true strength isn't in weapons or wealth, but in standing together against the darkness. And in the shadows of Europe's cities, corrupt men will learn to fear the night, knowing that somewhere out there a ghost is watching, waiting, remembering everything. For the ghost never truly dies. It simply evolves, adapts, finds new purposes and new battles. And as long as there are shadows to hide in and justice to be served, the legend will continue, haunting those who prey on the innocent, protecting those who can't protect themselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.